Vince Gill, who is 68 years old, still walks like the humble artist who plays guitar that fans fell in love with decades ago. But there is a sneaky side of her that people rarely sees, hidden behind her smooth voice and stacks of Grammys. The quiet critic, the fierce rival, and the man who has hidden how he really feels for decades by being country, chic. As an artist, Gill quietly disliked artists who put fame before craft, who broke custom, or who didn't respect the style he spent his life defending. Now Vince Gill tells us the names of these 7 artists in a recent conversation. You might think you know Vince Gill, but now you won't hear their or his music again. Once more, let's begin with the beginning. Before the fame and the fights, because by the end of his list, you'll have doubts about everything you thought you knew about country royalty. How Vince Gill came to be. He was born and raised in Norman, OK. It's not quite Nashville, but it's close enough to dream about. Vince Gill was born into a family that loved music and taught them hard lessons. His dad worked as a federal judge and played music in his spare time. Strict but kind, Gill learned how to be disciplined and play the guitar from him. These lessons would shape not only his music, but also who he was as a person. Vince's way to success was paved with broken hearts. In his younger years, he played in bluegrass bands and worked hard at small gigs while sleeping in cars and taking whatever money he could get. He learned to get by on hard work, talent, and the help of other musicians who saw how special he was. When he joined the country rock band Pure Prairie League, though, everything changed. People were interested in his voice, and this time it didn't hang up. He was a big name in country music in the 1980s and 1990s. He has 21 Grammys, a lot of casts, and respect from everyone in the business. His music was known as songwriter, and he never followed trends or took shortcuts. His guitar was beautiful, and his words were honest. One thing that came along with that success was sadness. Vince saw as the genre he loved started to change behind the scenes. It's faster, flashier, and more commercial. Country music was changing, and he didn't always like the changes. Artists rose based on looks rather than skill, he saw. Real music gave way to formulas made for the masses, which he saw happen. A lot of awards were going to acts that he thought hadn't done enough and had built their careers on tricks, catchphrases, and shock value rather than content. He quietly applauded at award shows even though his blood was boiling. People were lip-syncing while real artists were pushed to the background. He saw leaders in the music business reward artists who played politics instead of instruments. The worst part was that he saw the heart of country music. Filters, flash, and fake rebellion take the place of truth, effort, and humility. He kept his mouth shut for years, but now he's open. Vince has never called anyone by name before. Kris Kristofferson, We Made It Through the Night, which is pretty cool. Why Lord is great. Do you think this guy can sing really well? Not all the time. Fans who had known Vince Gill for a long time were shocked by this because for decades he had loudly praised the legends and greats who came before him. But there was one name that Vince avoided at all costs, according to people who knew him. Kris Kristofferson. They were from various places. Kris was the poet of the outlaws, raw, ragged, and hard to guess. People would still admire him when he left a party or an interview, even though he spoke badly. Vince, on the other hand, was exact and well-groomed. He worked as a technician in the studio and was a perfectionist on stage. He looked for technical ability, well-structured lyrics, and good vocal control. Even though Vince never directly attacked Kristofferson, there was something that people felt when he avoided talking about him in interviews and during long pauses. For years, people told stories about something that happened at a CMA practice. Vince is said to have left early when Kristofferson was supposed to perform, saying something about not wanting to see another train wreck on stage. It was never proven, but in Nashville, those kinds of things don't need to be proven to be true. In private, Vince was said to be very angry at how critics praised Kristofferson's messiness by calling it real, genuine, and gritty, while other, better artists who worked hard at their craft were passed over. A close friend said Vince once said, "It's not deep, it's just sloppy." We didn't expect much and called it clever. He wasn't mad about Kristofferson's success. He didn't like how it changed the rules of what greatness meant. Vince thought being an artist meant getting good at what you do. He thought Kris had skipped the punishment and been awarded for the harm. Even though years passed, the stress never really went away. There were no honors, duets, or group singing. There was no sign of Kristofferson at any of Vince's events celebrating other greats from that time. It was like a ghost wasn't invited. Now, Gill finally put him on the list, which was a very honest thing to do, not because they were mean, but because the gap was too big to hide. However, Vince thought that the next artist was even worse than Kristofferson because he saw them as signs of chaos. When country music gave up its soul, Garth Brooks, there is almost no reason to imply that Vince Gill and Garth Brooks are at odds with each other. Two giants in their fields, two names that are deeply rooted in country music. But the divide is hard to ignore if you know the history and pay attention to the small signs. Vince was the quiet artist and craftsman. He would spend hours perfecting a solo or rewriting a song until it felt like it was true. He brought fireworks, headset mics, and an ego the size of a stadium to the genre. For some, like Vince, it felt like he was stepping on holy ground when he changed country concerts into rock shows. It wasn't just the acts. It was also the way they thought. Gill liked subtlety, restraint, and rhythm. Liked size, movement, and flash. Vince whispered about loss, but yelled about it in arenas full of people. Gill saw himself as a protector of the roots of his country. For him, was the mastermind behind the world's biggest business change, for better or worse. Gill once said in an interview that he felt like we lost the stories in country music. He never said who did it, but his fans knew what he meant. He didn't need to call by name. It was clear who changed the rules and where the water went. And when started packing stadiums and taking over award shows, a lot of people thought the soul of country music was dying. Vince, with his sad songs and guitar riffs, was being quietly pushed to the side. Insiders say Vince was polite in public, but sad about how the genre had changed behind closed doors. He allegedly turned down chances to give Lifetime Achievement Awards, not because he was angry, but because he couldn't act like he admired when he didn't really feel it. It wasn't just a battle of styles. It had to do with ideas. Vince didn't think country music was about fireworks or jumping around in the crowd. It was about stories, roots, and being humble, and for all his fame, sounded like an age where those values were lost in the noise of the crowd. Was it jealousy or just heartbreak seeing a field change so much that it was no longer recognizable? It could be both. In any case, Gill never praised Garth's wins. He didn't applaud when people stood up. He never showed up to sit in the front row. Next, a hunky star with a mullet who caused a huge stir in the country for all the wrong reasons. Big Daddy Cyrus. Everyone knew Billy Ray Cyrus right away because of his song, Achy Breaky Heart. It was catchy. It went viral before there was such a thing as viral, and that was the start of the history of country music. But not all of them were cheering. The track was said to be insulting to real musicians by Vince Gill, whose musical background was in jazz, level sophistication, deep songwriting, and traditional country values. Gill was heard saying in the CMA Green Room that Billy Ray's song took country music back 10 years. It wasn't a one-time thing either. Industry insiders shared that quote like wildfire, which led to rumors that Gill saw Billy Ray as a threat to the purity of the genre. Vince thought that country music should be about stories, pain, hope, and the truth. But then Billy Ray came along with a song with a one-line hook, a dance craze, and a huge marketing machine that drowned out everything else. It is said that Gill once said the song wasn't country, it was singing with a mullet. It was said that they were at best chilly when they passed each other in the hallway. They never worked together or shared a stage. Some artists tried to find a mix between new ideas and roots, but Billy Ray seemed to be going the exact opposite way. He looked at the flash, the hair, the hips, and the trick. Vince thought it was all a joke about what country was supposed to be like. Heartfelt, grounded, and based on real life. Gill didn't really dislike Billy Ray. He didn't have to, but he didn't like what Billy Ray stood for. There was a rise in showy music that put image over substance, which pushed Nashville in a way Gill had fought his whole life. And the next singer, of all the people who have ever made albums in that style, she sold more than anyone else. Gill couldn't stand the sound of her songs. Shania Twain. Everyone thought Shania Twain was the best country pop singer ever. Her rise was lightning fast, breaking, glamorous, and impossible to stop. But for many conservatives, like Vince Gill, she was something else. She was a problem. The kind of raw, roots-based music that Gill pushed didn't have much room with her shiny sound, pop-heavy hooks, and huge crossover appeal. After her, a lot of artists tried to copy her smooth style, eschewing tradition in favor of well-known songs and music videos with million-dollar budgets. He never named her by name, but Gill once said, "We lost a generation of real country fans who chased radio hits. After that," he said, "we forget what genre we're in sometimes. Fans who knew what they were reading knew what they meant. In the music business, most legends finally met, performed together, or at least shared a stage. But Gill and Twain never did. Not during her rise at award shows, or even at tributes that covered a lot of different styles, where their names would have fit right in. That silence wasn't just weird for those two big acts in the same lane. It was very loud. Some people who knew Vince well said that he saw Shania's rise as a turning point. When Nashville began to focus on trends instead of ability in country, music began to sound like anything but country. The next name, he changed the sound of bro country and made Vince shake his head. Hi, Jason Aldean. Before Jason Aldean came along, he wore baseball caps and played heavy guitars. His songs were more about trucks, whiskey, and tailgates than they were about heartbreak and truth. He had a loud sound and a strong name, and his fan base grew very quickly. But not everyone in Nashville liked him, even though he was popular with most people. Vince Gill, on the other hand, has always pushed music as an art form and storytelling as soul, and he wasn't afraid to say that he didn't like the bro country wave. "I feel like we've made it too easy," he told Rolling Stone at one point. "There's room for fun in music, but let's not pretend it's country just because there's a pickup truck in the video." That wasn't just a thought, it was a direct hit. Gill saw Aldean's rise as another step away from the beliefs he fought to protect. Gill always thought that country music was about more than just loud production and shallow lyrics. He called this lifestyle marketing over lived experience. Aldean and Gill have both played at big country music events, but they've never been on the same bill. Sources close to Gill say she has quietly refused to host or go to any event where Aldean was the main attraction. It wasn't about pride. It was about who you are. Gill couldn't bring himself to agree with what Aldean stood for. It wasn't just a matter of style. It was deep and abstract. One left a reputation based on ideas and the other on shows. But if Gill thought Aldean was too loud, the next guy might have been too loud for everyone. Kanye West. It may seem unlikely, but hear us out. Vince Gill has said many times that he knows who Kanye West is, but he never said his name. He thinks that the ego in today's music is too much. Artists who put fame over skill and show over substance have been called out by him. And if that sounds like something you've heard before, it is. In an interview in 2016, Gill said, "I see young artists walk into a room and expect everyone to bow. In my time, listening first was how you gained respect." If you asked Gill who he meant, he just smiled and didn't say anything. But it wasn't an accident that quote came out at that time. It came out the same month that I told the world in a famous rage that he was the best artist of all time. There was a lot of guessing in the news. Fans understand what's being said. People in the business world said they knew exactly who Vince meant. Gill thinks music is holy. It's about being humble, helping others, and being honest. It's not about taking over award shows or always wanting to be the center of attention. And I became the personification of everything Vince seemed to be against, whether he meant to or not. Self, love over soul, chaos over control. They've never met because they didn't need to, because Vince didn't care about the genre. It had to do with morals. You now know the 7 names Vince Gill would not stand, either in public or in private. From legends to pop stars to risk takers who cross genres, these weren't small differences. There were deep cracks in the heart of country music. There were times when Vince picked silence over support and honor over fame.